Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all here today. My name is Margot Minardi. I have been here since 2007, and I've taught in Hume every year. I've been on campus since then. In addition to teaching Hume 110, I teach in the history department, and I specialize in American history from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries for the most part.
Hi, I'm Pancho Savery. I am in the English department, and I have been at Reed since 1995, and I have taught Hume 110 every year. Hume 110 is the only required course at Reed. One of the things we are trying to do, in addition to teaching people how to write, is teaching people how to critically think better, how to critically write better. We study several cultures and try to look at them in as much depth as possible from as many different perspectives as possible.
A term that you'll hear a lot at Reed is it's a conference course. You're doing all these readings, as Pancho mentioned, but then you're discussing them with a group of students, usually 16 students, that you're with throughout the year. So you meet 3 hours a week with your conference group and one of the professors, and you really develop a conversation with the students in that group about what you're reading over the course of the year. And a lot of classes at Reed use this conference model where it's a small group where students have a lot of initiative about what direction the discussion takes. And Hume 110 then is important as a first year course because it's kind of initiating you into that conference model. That's also where a lot of the writing instruction happens. So after you write each paper, you meet with your professor for what we call a paper conference. So you're meeting with your professor one-on-one, and they'll talk to you about what worked well in your paper, what aspects of writing you might improve on. So it really becomes a kind of highly personalized form of learning to write. So the hope is that over the course of the year, you get better at expressing your ideas orally, engaging in conversation with other people about intellectual topics in the humanities, and that you also get more experienced at doing that in writing via the papers and paper conferences.
Can you explain a little bit about paper conference and how you work with students, especially maybe students who haven't had this kind of intensive writing instruction before?
There is a paper topics committee that comes up with topics for each of the papers. You write 7 papers over the course of the year. So about 2 weeks before the papers are due, you will get topics to choose from. If you don't like those topics, you can consult with your conference leader and come up with your own topic. So you write the paper, your conference leader reads the paper, writes comments on it, and then you have the paper conference, which lasts from 20 to 30 minutes approximately, and you talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the paper. There's all kinds of questions that I ask students, like, when did you start writing? Do you feel this is an example of the best work that you are capable of doing? If you don't feel that way, why is that the case? I find the most important lesson that first-year students can learn is how to successfully manage your time. You are here, obviously, primarily to do schoolwork, but you also have to balance that with playtime, with getting enough sleep, with eating well. And sometimes it can take a while for students to figure out how to manage that. So one piece of advice that I give students is that as soon as the topics come out, you should start meditating on what you want to write about. And faculty members are always available for you to come and talk to them and talk through your ideas before you actually start writing. I'm sure most of us encourage students to give us a rough draft beforehand.
I love doing paper conferences because often it turns into a really engaging, for me at least, like mini conference on the reading, because the paper gives me some insight into what the writer thinks about a particular text, and I might have thought of it differently. And so I'll propose a counter argument, and then we'll kind of like argue it back and forth. And the idea there is I really want to help the students as writers cultivate that sensibility of how is a reader going to respond to this? What possible arguments might they have to counter my argument? What other piece of evidence might complicate my argument? So it's just sort of like trying to push the students' thinking a little bit further. But I think that's sort of essential to moving from the mindset where you are doing the paper to fulfill an assignment for a grade toward thinking about writing as a way that you push yourself and your readers to greater understanding of something.
So there's the conference component of the course, and then there's also a lecture component of the course. There are approximately 24 faculty members from different departments who teach in the course. There are 3 50-minute lectures a week, and those faculty members take turns giving the lectures. Sometimes people are giving lectures in their fields, but you also will hear people giving lectures outside of their field. So you could have a history person talking about art, for example. Going back to the word conference, most schools use the word seminar. What we mean by the word conference at Reed is not only is there a small number of people in the room, but more importantly, the primary educational energy is supposed to be coming from the students. It is not supposed to be coming from the faculty. So our job as faculty members when we are in the classroom with you is not to stand there for 50 minutes and tell you everything you're supposed to know about Plato. You are supposed to have done the reading, gone to the lecture, and then come into the classroom prepared to talk. And that is something else that is significant about Reed. For all intents and purposes, you are required to talk in class. And so Reed is not a place for you to be a sponge in the classroom where you just sit there and listen to what everybody else has to say and soak it up. You have to be actively involved in everything that's going on in the classroom all the time.
Sometimes I talk to students who are really excited about, Reed's kind of very highly participatory educational model, but maybe in their high school experience has been very unidirectional. The teacher teaches, the students listen. How do Hume professors work with students who are kind of new to the conference style of education and the conference setting?
Conference done well is people learning together, like working together to come to greater understanding of something. So when I have students who have not previously encountered a conference style of classroom, and that is extremely common. It's not common in high school. I often like to really stress that one of the most valuable things that you can bring to conference is not a pre-established performance of brilliance, but a question or a willingness to say like, oh, on page 57, that this text just got so weird. I don't understand what's going on here. That is often way more productive to conference discussion because it draws other people in, right? They want to help you understand it. We're all now working together to solve a problem that we've identified. So I would say a good test of whether you will like it at Reed is if you think you would like being in an environment where people are willing to say that they don't understand something or willing to ask questions. And I think willing to have your mind changed about something, because I would say the sign of a successful conference, I think, is if coming out of it, everyone is not thinking the same way they were going into it.
The first week of the semester, I do all the talking. And so I talk for 3 hours about what my expectations are, how I want people to write papers. You never want to have a classroom situation where 3 or 4 people are doing all the talking. That gets really boring really quickly. So in choosing to come to read, that is something that you should know and commit yourself to, that is the expectation.
Humanities 110 is the only required course at Reed, so it's the only course that all students have to take. On the other end of your Reed career, the other thing all Reed students have to do is write a senior thesis. And I think that we are preparing you for doing the senior thesis from day one of Hum 110, because we're thinking about how to ask a good scholarly question, how to put your ideas into writing. And so even if you go in a completely different direction, you need to be able to translate your thinking into written prose to write a thesis. I would actually suggest that that is one of the big benefits of going to a small college like Reed, is that you have a lot of opportunity to get to know your professors, and that's likely to happen pretty naturally in Hum 110 because of the paper conference and the year-long nature of the course. But I think it's a really good idea, and I often tell my advisees this, to go to all of their professors' office hours at some point early in the semester, so they can just establish a conversation and have a rapport with their faculty members. And that is, I think it just enhances your educational experience really well, but it's also good to have that relationship established if down the road you run into a problem and need some help that professor can provide, or if you want to get a recommendation letter from them. Like, you're not anonymous at Reed.
How do you bring together students who may have really different kinds of preparation from their high school experiences, and what kinds of support is available for students beyond their conference leader too?
We have a writing center, and there are student tutors there, and they have office hours all semester long, and they have extra ones right before Hum papers are due. So there is always the opportunity to get feedback on your papers while you are in the process of doing them.
I don't expect students to come in with a particular set of skills. People have different experiences in high school. There's also not a single way to read a book or write a paper or anything like that. So one thing that you're doing in your first semester in college in particular is testing out different ways to approach these different skills and figuring out what works for you. So, in paper conferences, I will, like Pancho suggested, kind of ask students to describe their writing process to me. And, if they describe the process and then they mention to me a particular problem that they have, if I think that problem might have arisen from their process, I might suggest, well, maybe you can try varying the process in this particular way. And so why don't you try that for the next paper, and then you can come back to me and let me know if that worked for you or not. So it's really like experimentation and seeing what works best for you.
One of the ways in which it creates community is, again, the fact that this is the only required course. So all first-year students are reading the same materials at the same time. They're all writing papers at the same time. That's why we like the idea of having a unified syllabus. Lots of other schools for first-year courses, each faculty member teaches their own little individual course. And we really believe in the idea of community. And so by having everybody read the same thing at the same time, it really does create a sense of community on campus.
I think sometimes people build really long-lasting friendships out of their Hum 110 conference because they spend so much time together.